For latest updates and short audio clips, follow us on Instagram, Reading the Author.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast Reading the Author, a unique show where we read authors' mind and not their book. Meanwhile, I truly believe and pray that you and your families are completely safe and healthy as well. Guys, today we have author Dr. Mrittunjoy Guha Majumdar sir with us, and he is the author of From Shiva to Schrodinger. By the way, this book is also available in Hindi. The translation is also available and उसका नाम है शिवा से श्रोडिंगर, and दोनों books Amazon पे available हैं. Thank you so much sir for coming on our show. It was truly my honor so that we are talking today.
Thank you, Gaurav, for having me here.
Pleasure, sir. So, sir, before we get into the podcast and know much more about your books, about upcoming projects, about your take on different aspect of this book industry, I would request you to please introduce yourself ताकि हमारे listeners आपके बारे में और जान सकें, and do share how you started this writing journey.
So I think I am a quantum physicist by my training and as a career physicist as such, and I undertook my education and training in India. Initially, I was at St. Stephen's College where I completed my graduation. Then I went over for my master's and PhD to the University of Cambridge at the Cavendish Laboratory. So वहाँ पे PhD in physics हुआ मेरा. I kind of graduated in 2019, and thereafter I was a postdoctoral fellow at Harvard University in the US and at TIFR and IISc Bangalore as well. So quantum physics has been my area, and especially many interesting areas, for instance like quantum entanglement, जिसकी हम बात शायद करेंगे as we move forward. And besides that, I think spirituality has been a very important part for my journey, in my journey itself, because since a very young age, I think it has been very much tied into all my different dimensions, आप कह सकते हैं एक तरह से. और during this period of time, I've been associated with the Ramakrishna Mission. I've been a UNESCO ambassador for the Ramakrishna Mission to the United Nations. And त्रिका शैव दर्शन का क्योंकि पहले से ही शैव दर्शन के साथ तो जुड़ाव रहा है. I have been connected to the philosophy of Shaivism, and over time I think there was this aspect of Advaita, which is this idea that everything is connected, everything is non-dual, and इसी का एक जो स्वरूप इसका मिलता है, this one strand of Advaita is in Trika Shaiva Darshan, and funnily and interestingly there are many resonances that I felt were present between Trika Shaiva Darshan and the foundations या philosophy of quantum mechanics या quantum physics जिसको हम कहते हैं. So that was the culmination, that kind of brought together these various thoughts, these various meditations, if you will, and that led to this book being produced and being written.
Okay. So sir, after listening to this podcast, many people will just love to explore this book. They might be interested in buying and reading it too. So let's say if we talk from a perspective of a new reader, what a new reader can expect from this book. Can you share some insights?
Absolutely. I think one of the major things I would like to start off with is that, we all read and hear about Kashmir as it stands today. Kashmir has been a very important part of India, of Bharat, and in terms of the Bharatiya civilization. Back in the day, Kashmir was where, Yoga Vashisht, for instance, or Natya Shastra, and many other treatises, many other celebrated works of dharma, of the Bharatiya Sabhyata have been produced and have been kind of expanded upon. And in this strand, I would say that Kashmiri Shaivism, Trika Shaiva Darshan, was something that started off around 700 to around 1000 AD, where various people like various luminaries like Abhinav Gupta, Utpal Dev, many other celebrated writers and thinkers brought this thought forward. And आज जब हम कहते हैं कश्मीरियत की बात करते हैं, when we talk about the beautiful cultural kind of synergies that we talk about, I often see it as coming from this very fundamental aspect of Kashmiri Trika Shaiva Darshan as well, because यहीं से अद्वैत की जो परंपरा है, the whole idea of unity, of the idea of oneness comes out in a very beautiful way from a civilizational perspective. So one important thing I would like the reader to take from this is this celebration of Kashmiri Shaiva Darshan, which has been a very important part of the Indian civilization. The other very important part that I would like this readers to take away from this, hopefully, is the idea that जब हम reality की बात करते हैं, when we talk about the ब्रह्मांड को हम जब देखते हैं, there are a lot of different aspects which are very different from how we observe it in day-to-day life, right? So जब हम physics की बात करते हैं 20th century में, things were very different when we talk about quantum physics. ये जो हम हमेशा आजकल आप हर बहुत जगह में सुनेंगे, आपके जो viewers हैं and listeners हैं, they may have heard about many TED talks, many kind of writers, popular science writers. So what is quantum physics, right? ये एक बहुत important question है. So quantum physics is basically the physics of the very small particles या very small जो अणु और परमाणु की हम जब बात करते हैं, at that level things are very different from how we see it around us, right? So for instance, if I roll a ball, right, and I roll it with some, let's say, initial velocity, तो वो किसी एक तरह से जाएगा सामने and it will stop after some point of time, right? और अगर मैं इसी experiment को बार बार करते रहूं तो मुझे same ही result, I will get the same result every time essentially if I keep the condition similar, right? But quantum physics में ये कहा जाता है that things are not so deterministic, उसको एक ही दिशा में नहीं लिया जा सकता, उसमें एक probability की बात आ जाती है, मतलब एक chance की बात आ जाती है, जहाँ पे if you do multiple runs of the same experiment you may not have the same outcome every time, right? And that's a very interesting thing because nature हमें ये बता रहा है कि there is something जिसमें चांस का एक स्वरूप कह सकते हैं, चांस का एक एस्पेक्ट निकल के आता है, राइट? सेकेंडली, वी हैव दिस वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग व्हिच आई हैव फोकस्ड ऑन इन दिस बुक, दैट ऑफ इंटरकनेक्टेडनेस, राइट? इंटरकनेक्टेडनेस माने जो हमारा जुड़ाव, एक तरह से हम कहते हैं आध्यात्मिक जुड़ाव हम कह सकते हैं, व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट स्पिरिचुअल वननेस, स्पिरिचुअल इंटरकनेक्टेडनेस, एंड इन कश्मीरी शैव दर्शन दिस इज वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट बिकॉज परमा शिवा, जो शिव जी का जो अंतिम स्वरूप है, जो सब अंतिम रूप है, that is the fundamental base from which everything arises. And in particular, it said that there are 36 tattva, 36 principles, if you will, that arise from the Paramashiva layer of reality. और quantum physics की जब हम बात करते हैं, then there are a lot of aspects of this thing called entanglement, right? हम बहुत जगह सुनते हैं entangled in affection, entangled in a lot of different things, but ये थोड़ा सा अलग है. Entanglement here means that particles के जो प्रॉपर्टीज हैं, सपोज दो हम अणु या परमाणु ले लेते हैं, पार्टिकल्स लेते हैं, एंड उनके बीच में जो प्रॉपर्टीज हैं, जैसे कि पोलराइजेशन की बात होती है या कुछ कुछ ऐसे फिजिक्स के प्रॉपर्टीज होते हैं जो कि उनके बीच में देयर इज एन इंटरकनेक्शन ऑफ सॉर्ट्स, राइट? सो अगर आप एक का प्रॉपर्टी जानने की कोशिश करेंगे, even if the other one is in a different galaxy, let's say, अलग ही पूरे galaxy में है, उसका भी property आप immediately जान पाएंगे, right? So there is a one-to-one connection almost between the properties. तो ये जो interconnectedness की बात आ जाती है, this is something which we don't see in day-to-day life often, right? I mean physics में तो at least नहीं देखते हैं, because suppose मैं यहाँ पे एक cloud देख रहा हूँ और कहीं और suppose China या Africa के ऊपर एक और cloud है, or that matter some other entity similar to what I have in front of me, there will be no connection between the two. मैं ये नहीं कह पाऊंगा कि उसमें कब बारिश होगी, for instance, or how things will happen there just by noticing the cloud here, right? But quantum physics में ये चीज नहीं दिखता है. The entangled aspect is very interesting. That is why, because this connection जो है, ये connection का aspect, this is seen many a times, right? So there are many such premises हम कह सकते हैं या elements, concepts जिसको कहते हैं, जो कि इन दोनों चीजों में दिखता है. However, I would like to highlight one more thing which is an important part of my book. हम आजकल बहुत बार ये देखते हैं कि फिजिक्स या साइंस एंड स्पिरिचुअलिटी का जो हम साथ में लाने की कोशिश करते हैं, then we often trivialize a lot of things. We say that दोनों में जो चीजें बताई गई हैं वो exactly same है या similar है, right? अब ये बोलना is not quite correct, right? ये बोलना बिल्कुल ठीक नहीं होगा, बिकॉज दोनों के जो परंपराएं हैं, दोनों के जो एक तरह से एवोल्यूशन रहा है, वो बहुत ही डिस्टिंक्ट रहा है, राइट? उनमें रेजोनेंसेस बैठ सकती हैं, बट उनका सिमिलैरिटी उस हिसाब से बोलना, दैट इज नॉट क्वाइट राइट ऑल द वे, एसेंशियली, राइट? सो आई थिंक in my book, what I have done very critically is to also show ki where are the differences as well, right? Where should we be careful in terms of judging kahan pe adhyatma shuru hota hai ya khatam hota hai aur kahan se vigyan ka आरंभ होता है, basically, right? तो ये जो एक transition है, ये जो डिफरेंस है, इसके बारे में भी विश्लेषण, इसके बारे में भी आई हैव ट्राइड टू write in my book as such, essentially, right? These 3-4 things I would say would be the most valuable things that a reader can take from the book.
Lovely, sir. So, sir, as we talked about the perspective of a new reader, now as we will be sharing on social media, so definitely people who have already read this book, they might be also listening to this episode. So, as of now, like what they can expect from you as of now, like you're writing something, you want to experiment a bit on some other genres, you want to stick to these only. Is there anything in the pipeline, and if yes, then if you can reveal with us?
Yes. Right. So my area has been primarily to do with philosophy, metaphysics, science, physics of course, and spirituality. तो इसी में मेरे लेख रहे हैं, especially in terms of essays, in terms of books, book chapters. So going forward, I think there are a couple of monographs coming out on the aspect of spirituality itself, on various different traditions and Bharatiya Sabhyata की तरफ से, in terms of Indic wisdom and civilizational wisdom, the exploration of these in the modern context. Besides that, obviously the scientific side, there is a book coming up on the science of different aspects of modern science and foundations of modern science, which is also expected by early next year. So I think this intersection is where I am currently positioned in, and that is where I will be going forward in the near future.
Okay. So, sir, as we talked about the perspective of a person who have already read this book, now we have been doing this podcast from last 4 years as of now, and I am in this industry for more than 8 years. What I have closely seen and observed that most of the authors are trying to be known or remembered as a certain genre or certain type of author. So when it comes to you, like आज से अगर 1-2 साल बाद कोई देखता है, क्योंकि it's a new book by Dr. Mrittunjoy, and उन्होंने आपकी किताब पहले से पढ़ी हुई है कोई 1-2, so what impact do you want to create on that reader's mind? क्योंकि मृत्युंजय सर की बुक है, इस टाइप की होगी, इस बारे में होगी, इस वाइब की होगी, इस टॉपिक पे होगी, कभी सोचा इस बारे में from a personal branding perspective?
Right. I think when I started writing, and when I write in general, I don't think I strategize all that much, because there are certain kind of compositions, certain meditations हम कह सकते हैं, which kind of come when I start off with a project, let's say, right? But invariably, because I am positioned in this niche kind of intersection जो है science and spirituality के बीच में, I think that will be the area around which readers should expect to understand things that I write as such, right? However, having said that, I think one more thing which I am very critical about, जो कि मुझे आज के संदर्भ में बहुत दिखता है, is that we often categorize things in very strict silos, in very strict categories, essentially, right? जैसे कि हम कहते हैं कि साइंस ये है और स्पिरिचुअलिटी ये है, right? हम कहेंगे कि सामाजिक चीजों का ये है, this is a social aspect and this is the राजनीतिक या political aspect, right? And these are all different distinct areas, right? And there is not much of a intersection, at least when people approach these areas, right? I think हमारे धार्मिक या Indic wisdom basically says that we should not be doing that, right? We should not be kind of categorizing ourselves in such strict domains necessarily, simply because there is a lot of interdisciplinarity which is coming into the picture and has always been there, right? So आज का एक buzzword है interdisciplinary research, interdisciplinary writing, essentially, right? हर कोई मतलब इस चीज में बहुत एक तरह से attention दे रहा है, but मैं ये कहूँगा भारत में ये हमेशा से होता रहा है, right? I mean, when we talk about politics and religion, for instance, people say that there is a separation of church and state, right? जो कि हम Western context देखते हैं, but in India we definitely had a certain separation, but at the same time जब हम पुरुषार्थ की बात करते हैं, when we talk about competencies at the personal front, we say that dharma, or the idea of righteousness in a certain manner, or the order of nature, essentially, that is very important when we take things forward, right, in any shape or form, right? तो इसलिए हम दोनों को decouple नहीं कर सकते हैं. We cannot decouple the two things, essentially, right? So I think that when people read my books, right, I mean, for instance, there will be a book maybe by next year, which is a little bit on a commentary on the politics and society as it stands, right? I mean, and it will be from a foundation of science perspective, foundation of philosophy perspective itself, and हमारे भारतीय सभ्यता and physics के साथ हम इसको जोड़ेंगे थोड़ा सा. So there, if you say that ये कौन से genre में बैठता है या किस category या subject में है, वो बोलना थोड़ा कठिन रहेगा, right? Because it is kind of bringing together a lot of different aspects of thought, right? But obviously we have to categorize in some form. So I would say the intersection of science and spirituality, as it stands, would be my genre. Yeah.
Okay, lovely, sir. So, sir, usually I don't ask this, like the next question which I'm asking to you. I usually don't ask this question, but it has to be, बहुत सारे ऐसे लोगों की सोच होगी या फिर उनका ये क्वेश्चन होगा कि how did publishing with Penguin happen? Because it is something not comes to, like naturally, या फिर बहुत majority लोगों का नहीं होता. Like when it comes to traditional publishing, we have a thought in my mind, like पिछले 8-9 सालों में मैंने भी ये सुना है कि it is a kind of non-replyable email जो कि आप भेजते हो, है ना, कि उसका रिप्लाई आएगा कि नहीं वो किसी को नहीं पता. So how did this happen? And even this जो आपकी ये ट्रांसलेशन आई है हिंदी में, that has also happened with the Penguin. So what was the process and how did it happen? Please share.
Ji. I mean, yeah, thank you for that question, because many of my contemporaries, peers, various readers actually have asked the same question, and also because of various other parameters, aspects as well. I mean, they did ask whether that was the most natural space to go for, and how did I begin with that process, essentially, right? So you wouldn't believe. I mean, I have never had a literary agent, for instance, right? मेरे पास कोई आज तक मैंने I've not paid for anything as such, right? It was just in terms of the proposal of the book itself that was sent out, and thankfully it did make a difference, I would say, make a mark, I guess. And it went from there, moving forward, essentially. And in terms of the Hindi translation, I mean, initially that was not in the picture at all, as such. But जब ये देखा गया कि there is a lot of engagement on by various cross sections of society, both India and abroad. जब हम भारतीयता की बात कर ही रहे हैं, जब हम धर्म की बात कर रहे हैं, ideally it should be also in Sanskrit, for that matter, if we could, right? But why not in Hindi, right? I mean, that was the question. तो धीरे धीरे करके वो जो डायलॉग है, वो जो एक तरह से चर्चा रही, उसमें this came very naturally and evolved from there, essentially, right? So I would say that there was no such plan कि इसी के साथ करना है या इसी वे में करना है. I always say that it was, again, I would say, the grace of Paramashiva, of Shivji, which made things happen, and I'm very grateful for that. Ji.
Okay. So as of now, like, what's your writing schedule? Like every day you devote some particular hours to your writing, or it's like random कि कभी कोई thought आया तो phone में डायरी में लिख लिया, बाद में बैठ के elaborate कर रहे हैं? How does it goes with you?
Right. So I think, I mean, I have been working in physics in something called as non-linear dynamics, right? मतलब चीजें बहुत non-linearly कभी-कभी होती हैं. मतलब उसका कोई एक fixed schedule उस हिसाब से नहीं कह सकते हैं, क्योंकि I think creativity also doesn't happen that way. I mean, there are often times when you have this proverbial writer's block, for instance, right? And you don't have you have these phases of not writing much at all, right? And then there'll be those phases जहाँ पे बहुत सारा you let it all out and you kind of compose things. So I think there is no one fixed format, I would say, for myself at least. And it is purely, as I said, there is no strategy or thought ki yahi karna hai. Oftentimes it has also happened that things have evolved while writing also, right? Ek pustak ya kisi project ke dauran, there have been places where things have turned out to be very different from probably what things we had envisaged in the beginning, right? So wo bhi we should, I think, give ourselves space for that, and I've always done that. So I would say there is no fixed format. It's fairly non-linear at times.
Okay. So, sir, as you talked about your project, your book, you take on this different aspect of this industry. Now let's get back to the time when the first time you heard कि tomorrow your book will be live. Everybody will be able to buy it, read it, judge you on the basis of what you have written, because generally लोग ऐसा ही सोचते हैं कि it is the reflection of thoughts, right? जो आपने लिखा हो. So उससे एक दिन पहले उस शाम को what was going on in your mind? Like, were you relaxed, excited? You just marked up some milestones कि इतने लोग जानते हैं, किताब इतनी तो बिक जाएगी. What was going on in your mind at that evening?
Well, I would not be honest if I say I was not nervous. Of course, there was some degree of nervousness, but at the same time, I think I had worked very rigorously on this. Actually, काफी कुछ साल हो गए थे on working on this project, and I was working with a few physicists, in terms of taking their advice or just discussing some points or discussion areas, and also आध्यात्म के तरफ भी I was very grateful and I'm humbled to know share with the viewers that there have been various gurus of mine, gurujis, who have always guided in certain forms, and I'm grateful for their guidance as well. So I think I was having a little bit of a calm kind of, I wouldn't say self-assuredness is a very strong word, but a certain calm of sorts. But at the same time, of course, I mean, I would be lying if I say there was no nervousness per se, right? I mean, that is always there. And so in terms of how many copies that would be sold, again, that's a very difficult question, because that was my first foray into writing, into publishing in a large manner. And of course, I knew that there were certain people who were readers, who were interested in what I speak or what I write about. So mujhe itna tha ki that at least those people may be very interested in reading about this new creation, this new book. But the way it just kind of with again Shivji's grace, that it just exploded. I mean, it was like it went to be a bestseller. It was showcased in the World Book Fair, and then Penguin went for the translation as well. So it has been doing very well, and by a life of its own, right? Because as I said, I have not kind of had much of a marketing in a big way, or in any way whatsoever, all that much. And also in terms of agents or many of the other paraphernalia of publishing. So I think it has had its own life, and I'm grateful for the response it has had.
Definitely. So, sir, as data says, every week hundreds of books are being published in a week. Okay. So when it comes to this, like, the market has become quite flooded, what I have personally seen, because after the first lockdown was over, the numbers of author got increased very rapidly. Like, there was a boom in this industry. So as of now, what I feel that publishing has become much more easier, whereas the marketing and distribution has completely changed the game. Like, it is very difficult as of now to distinguish your book among the others. So in this period of time, have you come across any such strategy, any such marketing tricks, or any such marketing plan, I can say, that has given you the most ROI? Like, you want to suggest to other people and other authors as well, and you personally want to just repeat for your others' books as well?
Right. I think in terms of ROI, I mean, because it's return on investment, as I said, I have not invested all that much. So I wouldn't use that term. But I would say that, in terms of discussion groups, keh lijiye, ya even podcasts, if you are able to, as this one, for instance, and various others, when people are interested in the book, they reach out, they have reached out in the past. And some podcasts have been having a good kind of following. And, people tend to connect using those, right? People are often hearing podcasts and engaging with YouTube channels, for instance. Also, if you have any academic or student-based circles where you want to discuss with the students as such about the book, and also articles, reviews, for instance, I was very grateful, and I'm very happy that there were many people who came out with reviews organically. I mean, they liked the book and they wrote about it, and it was a very humbling experience in that way as well. So I think these few strategies, I think, would be the ones that get things done. And again, as I say, I'm fairly new in this industry in many ways. So I can only share what has worked. I am guessing. I mean, again, that's an hypothesis for this book. But I think one more thing which is very important here is, getting the voice of also the people who are experts in these areas, right? I mean, for instance, in my book, I was very grateful to get, the reviews from some very eminent scientists and spiritual leaders as well. And they themselves, with, their grace and I would say they were very kind to me in that way. For instance, Professor Subhash Kakji, he also wrote about this book, Professor Anand Ranganathan ji, Professor Shishir Roy ji, and various Swami Sarvastanand Maharaj ji. So there were many people who kind of naturally had certain aspects to speak about, to comment on, and that also made an impact, because that gives a lot of nuance to this discussion, right? Because they come with a lot of rich wisdom and understanding of this subject. So obviously that gave a lot more of an authority in certain ways for the book itself. And that helped for people to connect also, right? So I think that makes quite a difference, Ji.
Okay. So sir, probably my last question to this podcast will be, क्या इस podcast को सुनने के बाद maybe it can be impact to many people, and they might start writing, or they might feel कि okay, जो मैंने draft लिखा है ना, I need to publish that. So they
जी.
might be holding their first draft in their laptop, in their diary, in their notebook. So what would be your advice for those upcoming authors?
Right. I think one should. So I'm myself the son of a professor of English. My father is a professor of English himself, and I have grown up, looking at poetry, reading poetry, prose, even drama. His area has been drama and playwrights. उसमें हमेशा से एक अच्छा practice जो मेरे पिताजी ने instill किया है, आप एक तरह से कह सकते हैं, is to kind of continue writing in as and when the thoughts come along, right? Because oftentimes it may not be composed in its entirety, but there may be something that is useful, that is meaningful, that comes from it. And obviously, one more thing is diligent revising and digesting and again creating in certain ways, right? That is very important. And at the same time, I think बहुत लोगों को ये भी लगता है कि हम शुरू करेंगे तो बिल्कुल लियो टॉल्स्टॉय का वॉर एंड पीस लिखने को ही चलेंगे, या some very masterpiece of sorts. You would be surprised to know, and the viewers I'm sure know about this, but many a times many of these masterpieces happen very spontaneously in many ways. They were written as the writer moved along and worked with their works in that sense. So I think ये जो idea है कि हम one fine day the sun will shine and we will have this great thing, I think does not work that way, right? Many a times. Unless there is a very fortuitous, yes, lucky एक तरह से वो हो जाता है कभी-कभी, but otherwise I think one should work along with it, as and when, right? So I think that would be my, I wouldn't say advice, I would say suggestion to all the writers. And I do hope that people engage with this book both in English and in Hindi, because इसमें जो मूल एक तरह से values जो हमने बताए हैं इसमें वो यही है that in our world today we are facing a lot of polarization, we are facing a lot of acrimony and violence, and that is mainly coming from this idea that us versus them की जो भावना है, मतलब हम क्या है और दूसरा क्या है, ये जो चीज है इसको बदलना बहुत जरूरी है. और ये भारतीय सभ्यता में हमेशा से we have had this thought. Unfortunately, somewhere along the lines we have forgotten it. We have been colonized as well, unfortunately. मैं हमेशा कहता हूँ कि हमें intellectual decolonization करना बहुत जरूरी है. And I think this book is a very humble attempt at trying to bring forward a very old and celebrated strand of Advait towards this end as we move forward as a country. जी.
Okay, so that's all for today, guys. I hope you must have enjoyed this lovely and inspiring conversation with Dr. Mrittunjoy. And if you do, then do follow our podcast, Reading the Author, available on all the leading podcast platforms. And don't forget to buy and read the book. You can just go on Amazon and search Dr. Mrittunjoy, Guha, Majumdar. You will get the book, buy it, read it, and share with your friends and family too. Thank you so much, sir, for coming on our show. It was my honor to be able to host you today.
Thank you, Gaurav, for having me.
Pleasure.